If he didn't get paid, people got hurt.
Hold on, I got your money. I got all your money.
For years, detectives had been searching for a way to shut the drug boss down. Detectives knew that murder victim Duane Walker was with Jones before his death. If they could prove the dealer was involved, they could finally take him off the street. But they needed more evidence. Investigators went to interview employees of Jones's business.
Hi, can I help you?
They hoped someone would know about Jones meeting Duane Walker.
Never seen him before.
Never seen this person at all?
But none of the employees were willing to talk. Drug boss Ken Jones continued his narcotics trafficking. He seemed to be beyond the reach of the law. On June 24, 1990, St. Paul authorities had found the body of 26-year-old Duane Walker burning in an alley. Just before his death, he had met with drug boss Ken Jones. Police believe Jones was involved in the murder. But witnesses wouldn't talk, and no physical evidence implicated him. Investigators got an unexpected break 3 months later when St. Paul police stopped a man for a routine traffic violation. A computer check revealed there was a warrant out for the arrest of Charles Shuck. Police took him into custody. They contacted the investigator who had issued the warrant, Special Agent John Tyndall of the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension.
We'll get it straightened out.
The arrest warrant was issued for Charles Shuck for importing 2 kilos of cocaine. We attempted to find him at the address that he had given, and he wasn't there, and we had no way of knowing where he was at that time.
Several months earlier, a drug interdiction team at the Minneapolis-St. Paul airport had spotted the courier. They watched Shuck pay cash for a full-fare, last-minute ticket to Los Angeles.
That would be one-way round trip.
Round trip.
Shuck didn't check a bag and carried only one onto the plane.
Boarding pass here.
The next day, agents saw him return, now with 2 bags. They knew couriers often had extra bags when returning from a drug pickup.
How you doing, sir? I'm Officer Moss. Officer Tyndall.
They told Shuck that they could not arrest him, but they could hold his luggage for inspection. Authorities could not open his bags without his consent, and he did not give it.
You're not hiding anything, are you?
Shuck's response was not that of innocent travelers.
If you tell them that you're going to detain their bags, typically, if they have nothing to hide, they want to stay with their bags. They don't want to leave those bags behind. Shuck had none of that. He had no questions, he had no concerns. His primary concern was getting out of there just as fast as he could.
Take him with us. I'm sure.
Shortly after Shuck left, a canine unit examined the bags. One was clean, but in the other, the dog smelled narcotics.
You can't get a search warrant based strictly on the actions of the dog. The dog was an integral part of it in the request for the search warrant, but it wasn't the only part. We also had to detail the fact that we had seen Shuck the previous night come in and buy a high-dollar round-trip ticket to Los Angeles, with a return flight being the following morning. These things are unusual. The fact that he carried 1 small bag on the aircraft and carried 2 off is also unusual.
Agents secured a search warrant to open the bags.
Oh, I think we have a winner
Inside, they recovered 2 kilos of cocaine. Investigators suspected Shuck was carrying the drugs for someone else.
Good job.
At that time, we weren't able to make a connection as to who he might be working with or working for, but my gut feeling was that he was a courier for somebody at a higher level.
Now that he had been arrested, Shuck learned of the evidence against him. He had his attorney propose a deal. In exchange for sentencing consideration, he would give up information on the man he ran drugs for. More importantly, he would also provide details about the unsolved murder of Duane Walker. Shuck said that the man who employed him as a courier was the same man who had ordered the murder. The man's name was Ken Jones. For every kilo of cocaine delivered, Ken Jones would pay Shuck $1,000. Shuck had worked for the drug boss since high school. It was precisely because their relationship was so strong that Jones did not retaliate for the lost cocaine. But Shuck was not the only courier. Jones' girlfriend also played a major role in the trafficking organization.
Charles Shuck told me that she was intimately familiar with his drug dealing operation. In fact, she had been a stewardess for an airline for a lot of years and had acted as a courier for him, bringing in kilos when she was working as a stewardess.
Investigators asked Shuck if the girlfriend knew about the murder.
Basically, I was a courier.
He said that around the time Walker was killed, she had been very upset.
It was not mine, it was Ken Jones. Irene, are you okay?
She told him that Jones had ordered her to clean up the bathroom of his condo.
What's going on?
There was a great deal of blood by the bathtub.
By the way, you've got
Shuck had heard Walker had been shot there.
You took it from the guy at the airport.
He said the killer's name was Jeffrey Barnes, an enforcer for Jones, and the same man whose suitcase held $13,000 in cash and a .22 Derringer pistol.
He felt that Barnes had shot the victim, Duane Walker, in the head, and that left town the following day after being paid by Ken Jones for that hit. Shuck alleged that the $13,000 cash that was found in the suitcase was at least part of the hit money that was paid to Barnes by Jones for doing the hit, and that the .22 caliber revolver that was found was the murder weapon.
Just know that it wasn't my cocaine. I was just
Shuck knew the caliber of the murder weapon and other details of the crime that hadn't been made public.
So we felt that there was some credibility on Shuck's part that Barnes and Jones could be considered as legitimate suspects in the murder of Walker.
Agents realized they might have the murder weapon already in custody.
See what we got here.
If they could prove it was the gun that killed Duane Walker, they could move forward with the murder case on drug boss Ken Jones and his enforcer Jeffrey Barnes.
Let's take it.
They retrieved the .22 caliber Derringer from the evidence locker. Investigators sent the Derringer to the St. Paul Ballistics Lab for testing. Examiners compared grooved striations inside its barrel to the grooves on the slugs removed from the victim. But their report was disappointing.
The results were inconclusive, in part due to the fact that it only had a 1-inch barrel, and the opportunity to pick up striations from the lands and grooves within this barrel were limited. The longer the barrel, the better the opportunity to pick up the striations. A short barrel like this gives you very limited opportunity.
Without a forensic examination matching Barnes's gun to the bullets that killed Walker, authorities had only the word of a drug smuggler to bring to trial. Agents shipped the gun to the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Lab in Washington, D.C.
The feeling was that their laboratory was somewhat more sophisticated. They were accustomed to doing things like that on a routine basis, and with their sophisticated equipment, they might be able to come up with a determination that was more specific. After it was examined by ATF, they came to the conclusion that it was, in fact, the weapon that was used to murder Duane Walker.
Investigators now knew that enforcer Jeffrey Barnes was in possession of the murder weapon the day after Walker was killed. But they still had no proof that he had fired the fatal shots, or that Ken Jones had ordered the hit.
Excuse me, ma'am.
Agents and detectives sought witnesses who could connect the two men to the homicide.
Could you take a look at the picture?
Whether due to loyalty or fear, authorities were met with silence.
One after the other, the people we attempted to talk to would not talk to us, and they would not give up anything. So we were back to the point of having only the statement given to us by Charles Shuck and no palpable way of corroborating any of the information that he gave us through other witnesses. Tim, got a minute?
Yeah, come on in.
Investigators applied for a warrant to search Jones's condominium. But the judge refused to grant one because they couldn't corroborate the story of the blood on the floor.
Information from the pen registers all supports it.
After almost a year, investigators realized that the case would not be solved without additional resources. They contacted the St. Paul FBI's Drug Task Force for assistance. Having worked narcotics for 20 years, Sergeant Tom Donaski was well aware of the reputations of Ken Jones and Jeffrey Barnes.
Both of them were very intimidating and imposing individuals. They had a violent background, and when we'd go and interview people, everyone would pretty much try to avoid